Welcome back to the OPEX podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by Keegan Martin and Kevin Don, the developers of OPEX's new course, Programming for Strength. On this episode, I asked the guys about all the material that is covered on this new course. This is a great conversation with the two guys. Enjoy. All right, Keegan and Kevin, thanks so much for making time, boys. Really appreciate it. How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Boys, there'll be a lot of people listening to this who they'll be very aware of Brand X, but they mightn't be too aware of you two guys as individuals. So Keegan and Kev, do you want to give us a background on yourselves, and whichever one of you guys want to go first, fire ahead.
Yeah. So my name's Keegan Martin. I am one of the co-writers of Programming for Strength here at OPEX. I'm a former American record holder inside of the back squat and a full-time powerlifting coach. I also work as the director of education for the Brand X method. So that's kind of my background and how I got here.
All right, go ahead, Kev.
All right. Yes. So I'm Kevin Dunn, and I'm one of the co-writers as well of Programming Strength here at OPEX. And also we're going to be doing a live course. So I guess we could say I'm an OPEX education coach. Prior to that, I traveled, I taught 240 odd seminars in 18 countries on exactly the topic covered in our course. How to program for strength, what movements to use specifically at different times in a strength life cycle, and how to progress people through it safely.
So I suppose my question to you lads is, why did you feel the need for this course?
So really, really good question. I think there's kind of a lot of misconceptions out there inside of the fitness industry as to what people actually need and how to progress somebody effectively towards general fitness. And we're starting with a lot of this like middle ground type of stuff that's completely unnecessary, when realistically most people just actually need a general base of strength and aerobic capacity. Right. And mixing those two together really gives you what you're looking for, rather than all the middle stuff, that lactic training, so on and so forth. And so what we found was that there was a need for direction in terms of general strength for a lifetime. And that life cycle that we've mentioned a couple of times now has kind of taken care of that for us.
Yeah, I think apart from that, over and above like these kind of concepts, I think that there's a fundamental lack of courses and education specifically on strength. And not only that, but the courses and education which exist right now within the field of strength are completely limited to a method, right? So we've got, for example, starting strength. If you go to do the starting strength seminar and run through that education system, then what you're going to learn is how to teach the starting strength method to clients. It's going to be the same with other methods out there, for example, like conjugate and things like that. You are learning a specific system and then how to apply that system to clients. Now, that isn't really what we're thinking about in terms of what happens here at OPEX. We're always looking for, is this what we can apply to the client? Maybe. Is it best at this time? I don't know. So it's we're looking at what applies to each client individually at their point through a life cycle, depending upon their goals, after things that we know that we're running through in the OPEX system, which is consultation and assessment. We've always got to come back to assess, don't guess. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we cannot just take, 5x5 strong lifts or 3x5 starting strength and run that through every single client that comes in the door, because people with a very, very low training age are lacking, first of all, in motor control. They're lacking in muscular endurance and strength endurance. Why are we progressing them to the tier 4 of absolute strength when they don't have any motor control? So the thing is that right now there's a gap in the market, which is where everybody is just being plunged into a specific system without any knowledge and broad-based understanding of how strength can actually be applied in an individual way without just applying only a template. And that's the downfall right now, right? So this course for us has been a way to try and educate people on the principles. They can then take those principles and apply that to their clients, rather than us only teaching an unwavering and totally set absolutist method.
I think beyond that too, all of the courses that you're going to come across are geared more towards developing you specifically as an athlete rather than how to coach, right? So it's not
Well,
You know,
starting strength's a coach's
right. Starting strength would be the only one I would say that's out there, though, that's guided for coaches specifically to coach athletes and kind of guide them through what looks most like ours. However, it's a method, like Kevin said. Most other courses out there are going to be, you know, you're taking it as the athlete, or going to take this method and apply it to other athletes.
Yeah, and I think also what we've tried to do here is we've come up with a list of essential sort of motor patterns that we're calling them, or EMP, and it's to try to help coaches to understand where each client fits within a framework of failure. So right now, what we might see, you know, coaches looking at certain things and not really knowing how to fix them, right? So what we've tried to come across, you know, if you take something like starting strength, I mean, yes, we've got key points of performance that you want to hit in the squat or the press or the deadlift, but it would be, what do you do when these individual things actually fail or fall apart? Because we've got different reasons why things fall apart. If we're looking at novice intermediate lifters, we'd be looking at things that fall apart, like their motor control. Their ability to know how to brace themselves, their ability to hinge, their ability to abduct the hip, extend it, or sort of rotate the femur externally, and other motor patterns that we've defined in the course are going to cause failures in lifting. But there will be other people that are advanced lifters who are not having failures in motor pattern, they're just having failures in their strength or ability to pick up the object. So how you fix those things are completely different, right? How you fix a motor pattern failure is going to be repeated myelination of that motor pattern itself. So just to put that simply, we need to build that motor control through repeated movement. And the way we're going to be doing that is through hypertrophy rep ranges and through more time under tension, which would be a greater sort of tempo. We're looking at tempo training. So it's how to progress people through low intensity, high volume, high time under tension, through a continuum that then moves down to high intensity and lower volume, right? And then what type of accessory movement would you use to fix this? So we had a failure of bracing. So is doing some, so let's say they're back arched in the deadlift. That could be determined as a bracing failure. But would we use a barbell bent over row to fix that? No, because we need to teach them how to brace, but we have a more advanced lifter who's failing just because their lats aren't strong enough to be in that retracted position. Would I use a barbell bent over row there? Maybe, right? So it's how to teach coaches themselves how to actually split these down and how to identify what's actually failed and how to triage it. Because when we come to triaging anything, we're looking at, there's no point in bringing someone back to a level 1 fix if they failed at level 3. We need to identify it was a level 3 failure and bring it back to that and fix that there. Otherwise, we're wasting time inside the gym and really, you know, just spending time padding and fluffing out things that are not necessarily needing to be worked on. So it's trying to pass that education on to coaches as well.
So speak a little bit more about programming from strength. What can people expect from it? Is there an assessment piece? Is there a theory piece that covers, you know, the principles? And then within that, is there a programming piece? And then within that, is there corrective pieces given, like, if this is what you're seeing with a particular individual, given where they are on that spectrum of novice, intermediate to advanced, whatever we want to call those, but in terms of where they are, in terms of their fitness, lifeline or career. Like, so what is there, is there an assessment piece, a theory piece covering the principles, and then is there a technical model piece, and then is there areas that kind of show correctives, if, you know, potential correctives if this is what you're seeing with a given individual?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's true to the heart of OPEX, right? Where there's a consultation, an assessment, and then the program design. So we're going to start to see, you know, that same kind of process take place with all of the clients inside of our course. They're going to go through that same bow tie type method that you see and you find inside of CCP. You've got the assessment. They apply what we find in the assessment or their warm up each day to absolute strength, and then we use accessory to fix the faults that we start to see, as Kevin mentioned, whether that's through you know, EMP breakdown or strength breakdown. There's that little beep again, huh?
It's fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that it would be fair to say that all of the things you mentioned are things that we're going to be running through. Yeah. Super important. We know, and I've already mentioned it, it's got to be assess, don't guess. If we don't run the clients through a consultation and assessment, we're not going to be able to figure out where they are on the continuum. right? So the continuum runs left to right, and they're going to enter and exit in the same way. So we've got novice, intermediate, advanced, master, and finally grandmaster. So you're going to find that novice and grandmaster are going to be focusing mainly on motor control, right? And then we're going to have our intermediate is going to be focused more on strength endurance. And then we're looking at, we've got the advanced and masters. They're going to be the ones that are more likely to be expressing maximal contractions. So there's a life cycle to take them through. There's got to be assessments to figure out where they are within that life cycle,
where they sit and what's appropriate.
right? And then that's how we're going to be able to design the program for them. Yeah. Although I would say at all levels, whether it would be novice, master, grandmaster, advanced, everybody's still going to be able to be working on certain aspects which are going to be the same, such as motor control, right?
Just for anyone listening into this and they hear you saying motor control and they're like, wait, motor control for a beginner and then for a grandmaster? I don't get it. Can you expand on that a bit more for people listening?
Well, that would have to be determined on how we would define what a grandmaster would be, right? So if you look at a grandmaster, we're looking at someone of a very high training age. Also, it could be someone of a higher chronological age. So for us, a grandmaster is going to be someone that is suffering basically from what we call the aging phenotype, right? And sorry to call it, a suffer, but that's what it is as you get older, right? So what we're looking at is a grandmaster is going through the same thing as a novice, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, in the fact that as we're aging, so we've got motor units, right, that are controlling our movement within space. And as we age, you're actually decreasing in number and density of motor units within the muscle, right? So therefore, motor control and muscular endurance is very, very important to people suffering from that aging phenotype, right? Because as a side effect of aging, they're losing motor control. Now, we cannot increase the number of motor units that they've got as they're aging. But what we can do is that via hypertrophy and increasing muscular cross-sectional diameter is that we can actually increase the size of the motor units, which mitigates the fact that this is happening, right? So what we'd be looking for is, again, it could be like a missing sort of piece for people in terms of their understanding of this course to think about a grandmaster or a master in terms of elite achievement within the sport of lifting or within strength itself. That is not what we're referring to here. What we're looking at in this course is how to progress people for a lifetime of health and well-being via using strength for vitality and longevity. So for us, a grandmaster is not someone who is in extreme achievement in strength sports. It's someone who is of a higher chronological and training age, right? So what we're using strength for here is to offset aging side effects, many of which, so we've got sarcopenia, right, which is basically they're losing muscle mass. We've got osteopenia, so they're losing bone density. Then we've got other things such as metabolic syndromes, so we've got insulin resistance, and we've got things like a decreased ability to sense and respond to nutrition, right, which again has a knock-on effect on sarcopenia. If you are having a decreased sensing to protein intake, therefore muscle protein synthesis events are decreasing, then you are going to go into a catabolic state. We call it anabolic resistance. As someone progresses through chronological ages, we are going to see more and more resistance to anabolic events. They're going to have to overcome that with things like a higher input of dietary protein. Specifically, we're looking at leucine overload events to try and increase muscle protein synthesis. But also, we're going to be looking at using strength, right? So we need to use strength in terms of compression. So compressive forces, so let's say we're standing under a back squat, are affecting what we call, like, let's say hard tissues, right? So we're affecting the skeletal system. That's responding Wolff's law, right? Which is basically the bone is going to respond in terms of increasing density to being compressed. Then we've got tension that we're going to put people under. If you think about, for example, what's happening to the arms in deadlift or hanging from a pull-up bar, where your body's being lengthened. Now that is going to have positive effects on the soft tissues. So we'll be looking at tension is resisted by muscles, and then things like ligaments and tendons, and compression is resisted by the skeleton. So therefore, strength training has a great effect on the fact that you're losing muscle mass as you're aging and losing bone mass. Also, we've got a man-made side effect of aging, which is called polypharmacy, which is exactly what it sounds like, is that you're on multiple pharmaceutical interventions to try and mitigate the side effects of aging. And each pharmaceutical intervention in of itself has another pharmaceutical intervention to offset the side effects of the first pharmaceutical. So we end up with people on huge amount of medication. We've got metformin for insulin resistance, and they're on statins for cholesterol. So it's about how we can actually use training here to try and get people through the aging phenotype in a holistic way without having to have pharmaceutical interventions, but having the training itself as the intervention.
Damn you, entropy.
Yeah, exactly.
Aging fucking sucks. I don't know. Anyway, hopefully by the time we get to that stage, boys, they'll have it all figured out. Just inject this, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Boys, it's funny. We've gone 20 minutes in this conversation, and I know this will sound a bit of a rudimentary sort of question, but what exact exercises are covered on this course? We haven't actually covered that yet. So it sounds like squat, deadlift, and is it the bench press? Is overhead press covered, or fill us in on that?
Overhead press is covered in an accessory piece. So we were choosing what we would say here would give that, and you say, the biggest bang for your buck, right? Yeah. So we'd be looking at how we can have the greatest compressive, tensive, and also effects of what we call moment, right? So like rotation around a joint.
Essentially the largest lifts.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So we want to have what is going to be able to allow you to lift the most weight through the largest range of motion and build strength that way. So the standing overhead press could be a point of contention simply because the standing overhead press has the longest kinetic chain, right? So therefore it could be seen or argued, and I would even argue the case that it could be superior to the bench press in some situations. So it is in the course, but it's not in there as one of the major lifts because we know that we're going to bench press more load.
Yeah. Great stuff. So I believe you guys are also going to run live courses too. And so can you fill the listeners in on what one would expect from these live courses? Are they 1-day events? Are they 2-day events? Just fill us in a little more on the details around these live courses.
Yeah, so the live courses are going to be 2-day events, and we're going to be digging into specific mechanics and variations that are going to come from different anthropometrics, right? So people are built differently. So we're going to be digging into what these lifts should look like specifically with different hip structures, different leg lengths, torso lengths, things of that nature. That would be, in terms of the movement, what we're going to be digging into that differs from the online course. And then taking a deeper dive specifically into programming, giving the participants avatars and looking at what maybe a month would look like for an intermediate. So it's more practice, and that's what we're going to be seeing on the practical side of things inside of the live. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Essentially, I mean, we're looking at individualization of the program, right? So if we're putting out this online course, we're just taking a much deeper dive in this, like Keegan said, into anatomy and biomechanics, because how the low bar squat looks for one athlete will vary in how it looks for another. And here's the thing. Maybe some athletes shouldn't be doing the low bar squat, right? So this is like a huge argument, obviously, within the strength. High bar, low bar, right? So what we'd be looking at is why would I choose a high bar squat for one client? Why would I choose a low bar for another client, right? So we'd be looking at anatomy and biomechanics in terms of a squat variation selection, but also it would be looking at movement assessment in terms of a squat variation selection. Some people may have the levers in terms of if we just draw it out on a piece of paper how it looks, but if we bring them to the gym, we're going to find that actually things are a lot more complicated than a two-dimensional model, right? Because we're looking at things like, can you dorsiflex? Because if you cannot express a vast amount of dorsiflexion improvement over and above what is required for a low bar squat, you're probably not going to be a very good high bar squatter.
Yeah.
Right? If you do high bar squat without a good amount of dorsiflexion, then we're going to find a lot of knee sliding forwards. It could contribute to, something like patella tendonitis in some situations. So it would be a dive into anatomy and movement selection, because what we want to make sure that we're doing all the time is selecting and doing what's best for the client. So it's sort of an education, and yeah, you can high bar, you can front squat, you can overhead squat. It just depends on the situation. And here's the principles that's going to allow you to determine which situation would be best for those things. Apart from that, there's other things that we really haven't had time to really get into on this course. So for example, the differences between training males and females. So it's huge. In terms of neuromuscular efficiency, the type of engagement that we're seeing in males versus females, you know, the percentage of a 1 rep max and a 5 rep max that women and men can express.
Types of fibers, yeah.
It's completely different. Predominantly, we'd be seeing a lot more type 1 fiber in females versus type 2. So it's their ability to express power would mean that their rep ranges, their percentages, and their time under tension even should be completely different. So it'll be looking more in depth into the differences between the sexes as well. And then, as Keegan said, we're also going to be looking in depth in program design. Because this course is actually called Programming Strength. Right? It's not called teaching the strength movements. So what we've got a huge focus on excelling in exactly how to give the right type of programming to the right type of client at the right time. That's over and above anything else, the most important thing. I mean, sure, you can give them loads of different squat variations, but here's the thing, is that getting better at anything, and if we're using training as a medication protocol or an intervention, then it needs to be for sure that the formulation of the medication is correct. There's only 2 things that can go wrong in the gym, right? In terms of giving training to people, if we're viewing it as medication. Number 1, formulation is wrong. Number 2, the dose was wrong. So formulation and dose is all about programming. Dosage would be frequency, and then formulation would really be what type of exercises and movements am I using at each specific time to have the response that is desired upon that phenotype.
Yeah, you're speaking my language there, boys. I like it. But Louis Simmons told me everyone should box squat. He also told me that squatting's a leg curl. I was like, okay, Louis, whatever you say.
Have you ever heard of the voice from authority fallacy?
I have indeed.
Yes.
By the way, I didn't say I believed Louis there either. I think Louis great though.
No, but this is the type of thing we hear, right? Mark Ripito says this, Louis Simmons says that, and at the end of the day, yeah, okay.
You should only do this type of squat, or your hand should be this wide on bench. Well, it actually depends for every person, right?
Oh yeah, no. In fairness, yeah, he'd said that, but I was making fun. That was all. But it's funny too. You talk about that dorsiflexion. It makes me think of Dan Cleater from St. Mary's in Twickenham. Jeez, there was a big Twitter thread that went on. He doesn't believe the dorsiflexion has any impact in squatting. He believes it's to do with the position you get your hip in. And then all these people had this big discussion about it, and it's just like, there's children starving in Africa. I think there's bigger concerns in the world here, people. But it just went a bit crazy. So it did. But before we wrap up here, boys, I would like you to maybe address someone, like we kind of touched on there, some of the common sort of misconceptions you see around deadlift and squat and bench. We kind of jokingly touched on it there, but what are some of like these common misconceptions that, you know, that you do address in the course? Obviously, individualization is a huge thing. Like there is this sort of general blueprint of how we should set up to lift, depending on the lift, if it's a high bar squat versus a low bar versus sumo versus conventional deadlift, etc. But what are is there like these common sort of, you know, misconceptions that you nip in the bud in the course? Is there anything you can address there for the listeners?
I don't really think that we're specifically addressing maybe any misconceptions. I mean, I've definitely touched on, you know, squat selection and why it doesn't really matter if you're high barring or low barring, right? It depends on the individual. In terms of deadlift, I wouldn't really say that I come across any massive misconceptions. I mean, maybe there would be people that say, well, you should be doing sumo because you can pull more sumo and things like that. So, I mean, for us, it would be looking at what gives the greatest strength output and remembering that powerlifting and being strong are 2 different things. So being strong is taking the biggest load through the largest range of motion around the joint. Powerlifting is taking the biggest load through the smallest legally allowed range of motion. Yeah. Right? That's a completely different thing.
Sport.
Because if I take you and you've got a 200 kilo high bar squat, and then I teach you how to low bar and you low bar 220, guess what? I haven't made you stronger. I've given you a mechanical advantage. To say that a low bar will make you stronger, frankly, sounds preposterous to me, because all it is a mechanical advantage. Yes, you may be able to lift more weight, but if we were to look at actually what's happening muscularly, if we were to do some kind of electromyographical studies, which have been done, then actually muscular activation between high bar and low bar, and even between front squat and high bar squat, it's vastly similar. right? So these kind of misconceptions are things that have gotten out there. I mean, things like saying that one type of squat is quad dominant and another type is posterior chain dominant has also been rubbished, simply because of an anatomical paradox which only occurs in the legs of the human being, called Lombard's paradox. And that is that actually in the concentric phase of a squat, that quads and hamstrings are not acting as antagonists. So we know that actually in the concentric phase of a squat, neither type of squat variation, high or low bar, is truly quadricep or hamstring and glute dominant. Certainly quads and hamstrings and glutes will be doing different things at different phases of the squat, but in terms of overall activation, similar.
I think the biggest misconception that we really fight against is that inside of this course, we open up the idea and the concept that, you know, it's not about how much weight somebody is lifting, but rather how to progress them through and utilize strength for health, right? Utilize it for longevity. Everybody's so concerned about how much somebody is squatting or how much somebody is deadlifting. That's not what we're concerned with at all. It's how do we put them into the right position to be able to continue to do this for the rest of their life.
That's right. This is not how to get better at sport. It's not how to use strength to get better at the sport of competitive functional fitness. It's how strength can impact you in a meaningful way for longevity.
And how do you bring that to your clients?
Great stuff. Have you boys come across Tony Pierce's work with resistance training specialists?
No.
No, just I thought you might have, Kev, because you're just speaking a lot of biomechanical stuff there, and it's like because it's his whole spiel about like, you know, how like you need to individualize the given movement to the individual given their whole sort of body structure and whatnot, you know. Okay. So
no, I'll look out for that though. Now that you've mentioned it, I like to.
Well, I know Ben Pekulski, like he, you know, the bodybuilder or the former bodybuilder, he's a big Tom Pierce follower, like, and that's his whole thing is that, like, you know, because he would obviously be training people who wanted body composition and body physique sort of changes, and like you'd get people where Ben would be like, listen, squatting for you for your quads, no use. He says, but for you, yeah, because of the way your structure is, and it's how it's not just what exercise you're doing, it's how you're doing and executing. And it just, I thought, Kev, that you might have come across his work just because the way you were speaking about some of the exercises there. Listen, boys, I'm not going to lie, you've gotten me excited about this. Before we wrap up, is there any final things you would like the listeners to know in terms of, well, actually, when is the course going to go live online? Where are some upcoming live courses, if you have any dates and venues? And if people wanted to know more from you guys specifically, where can they reach out?
Yeah, so at the moment, it's looking like the course is going to be going live around about the 1st of August there.
Nice.
Yep, so the tail end of what right now is next week. And our live course is going to be held here at OPEX HQ on the 5th and 6th of October. So that's down here in Scottsdale in Arizona. So
that's a nice time of year to get out there too, in October when the temperature
gets a bit cooler. Yeah, right now it's a bit
right now it's burning up.
Yeah.
Too hot for my white Irish ass out there. I don't know how you're holding up with your white Scottish ass.
Oh really? It's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's tough. Yeah. Very hot. Yeah.
All right. And if people wanted to directly contact you guys as individuals, you know, you got any social media feeds or an email or?
Yeah. My Instagram is at @TBXM_Keegan_Martin. And they can email me at Keegan@thebrandxmethod.com.
Yep, and my Instagram is, I just changed it. It's Kevin Don. So it's like Kevin with 3 N's, and then Don, D-O-N.
It'll be in the show notes, so don't worry. So if you're driving right now, don't be trying to look it up on your phone while you're driving there. Keep your eyes on the road. God damn it. So guys, listen, really appreciate it. Great to have you on. And as I said, I actually genuinely am really looking forward now to seeing this course and viewing the material. Sounds like it's going to be a great resource for all the coaches listening here and for anyone listening. We don't just have coaches, we also have a lot of fitness enthusiasts, but really appreciate your work. So for everyone who's listening, until next time, peace.